Mr. Aubrey C. Norton, Member of Parliament, and to his right, none other than Mr. Ganesh Michael, Member of Parliament. Today, we will have some addresses made by the members on the panel, and we will start with the address from the Leader of the Opposition.
Good morning to all the members of the press and to those listening and viewing this press conference. As you are no doubt aware, we had a number of engagement overseas, and I wish to briefly report on those engagements. We met the IMF, and we had the opposition delegation had the opportunity of outlining its vision and to critique elements of the report from the IMF and the Guyana situation. In that regard, we also pointed out that while the report suggests a reduction in inflation, that there isn't a necessary correlation between the reduction in inflation and the reduction in the cost of living. We pointed out that the cost of living is increasing rapidly because of the lack of foresight in a plan by the government. We also point out that there is the absence of competition and that a lot of the resources allocated in this society are allocated by the state with little or no scope for economic competition. You're also aware that we met with Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries and the Congressional Black Caucus. Those meetings were very fruitful. I sense by now you have recognized that Barra Jack Dio and the PPP were trying to create a narrative that we did not meet anybody and the nonsense that are concomitant of Barra Jack Dio. I think the congressional leaders have released the pictures and have taken their position, and it should be clear to all and sundry that we did meet with them and we had a successful engagement and we were able to outline the vision of the APNU AFC for Guyana, which is a vision that is centered on the improvement of the lives of the people, while pointing out that the People's Progressive Party's vision is one to enrich the few, especially its elites, its families, friends, and favorites. We note that Vice President Jack Dio and some of his henchmen are attempting to underplay the successes of the Diaspora Conference. I wish to say we had a successful Diaspora Conference. I wish to point out that we are very thankful for all who participated in that conference, and we wish particularly to congratulate CGID for organizing the conference and for ensuring that we had access to the decision makers in the United States, and therefore that our position can be heard. Again, thanks to them. We do not believe we need to go much further into the conference. I think the pictures that are released and the statements that were released by Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries would have nailed the PPP propaganda and lies that are normal part of them. Having said that, we now turn home into Guyana. Clearly, Guyana is in crisis. There's crisis in every area. Let us start with the Stabroek Block audit of cost recovery. An audit which suggests that 214 million was overstated. The 214 million is part of the usual PPP corruption. It should be made very clear here that there was an attempt by the People's Progressive Party to ensure that it covers up this issue. It must be noted that it is the media and the opposition that brought it into the public domain and pointed out that the government had brought it down to 3 million. Now, clearly, these are corrupt activities. The attempt to blame a public servant must be understood. We do not believe that the public servant is responsible. This is cost recovery. This is dealing with what we will get at profits. That surely cannot be left to a public servant. It has to be the responsibility of the political government. The public servants give technical and other support. So to blame Mr. Gosai really and truly is throwing him under the bus. We understand the authoritarian nature of the regime, and we know that Mr. Gosai will not be able to speak what the truth is. But we are convinced that it is the corruption of the government. It was clearly intended to conceal it, and it was clearly intended to ensure those resources do not go to the people of Guyana. And so we condemn the government's approach. We believe that this is another attempt to siphon off resources that are really for the people of Guyana. If to not be satisfied with the crisis in the audit of the Stabroek block, the government then adds on us crippling blackouts. And then Jack Dew, in his normal manner, tried to suggest that nothing was done during the leadership of the APNU-AFC in 2015. I want to read for you what Mr. Raul Lucas, the chairman of the board at the time, said. Referring to the government, he said, had they followed the APNU-AFC plan, we would have had 221.7 megawatts of generating capacity from new investments, and not the 180 megawatt that the government is now presiding over, unquote. Now, when one looks at the generating capacity that the APNU-AFC was putting in place, it is clear that the APNU-AFC had a plan, as described by, I think, Mr. Patterson, by Mr. Lucas, and all who are familiar. They had short, medium-term, and long-term plans. But they say the proof in the pudding is in the eating. Guyanese will know that between 2015 and 2020, we reduced power shortages in a significant fashion. Blackouts were becoming the order of the day. Today, blackouts are crippling the society. And this is because the PPP is incompetent. It is because they are corrupt and they lack foresight and a plan. And therefore, they are pushing us into the dark ages. The APNU-AFC left clear plans, and had they implemented those, we would have been in a better position. But you know what is interesting? There's a silence from the private sector. Were it the other way around, you would have heard all those private sector institutions criticizing and condemning the government. But suddenly they are silent. We believe if you are a true civil society body, if you are true to protecting the interests of your constituency, the private sector should be speaking out on the government's lack of a plan, of its incompetence, and of its corruption, because they are affected in a direct way. But what is most important is that Guyanese now have the evidence that the APNU-AFC was governing better than the PPP is governing at present. And I believe that the evidence there should inform voters in the coming general and regional elections, because in the energy sector, we have proven that we had a plan and we were in a very structured way dealing with the problems. And then there is education. Education is also in crisis. I don't have to go back through the data on what is happening in education. But what was most interesting recently is the president deciding he will select a group to engage them and then make pronouncement based on that engagement. The president is expected to uphold the Constitution of Guyana. And may I say this? The president, one, showed total disregard for the Guyana Teachers Union. The president seems not interested in recognizing that the people to bargain for teachers are the Ghana Teachers Union. He is also undermining the trade union movement. They seem to believe only trade unions that support the PPP openly are to be considered. And even them, when they challenge the PPP, you see how harsh and destructive they are. They are undermining collective bargaining. We believe that the government must bargain with the trade union. Their entire approach is anti-working class. They are not promoting the interests of the working class. They are promoting the interests of their friends, their families, their favorites. And that, in large measure, is responsible for the decline in education, their unwillingness to allow the professionals to do their job and to place people based on merit rather than political allegiance. And so we believe the government must engage the Ghana Teachers Union and begin a proper process of collective bargaining. Health is also in crisis. Visits to the Georgetown Hospital, New Amsterdam Hospital, and I have reports from London that suggests nurses are short, and it is assistants who are not qualified to be nurses that are carrying the hospital. That cannot be acceptable. But we see a kind of a nefarious approach, because at the same time that the Constitution provides for free health services to our people, we have no problem with private hospitals. But when you're undermining the local health system, when you are ensuring that it doesn't have drugs, or you have people who are taking the drugs and carrying it into private institutions, and then our people are forced to go to those private institutions, we have a problem with that. It is a violation of the Constitution. The Constitution states clearly that the government should provide free health services. A visit to any one of the health institutions will recognize a lack of drugs, and people are sent to these very private pharmacies and to the private hospitals. Guyana's health sector is in crisis like many sectors. It is evident that the Minister of Health is a failure, and he should do the decent thing and resign. We have touched on just a few of the areas of crisis, but there are many more that we will touch on. Thank you.
At this time, I will permit Member of Parliament Ganesh Michael to address you.
Thank you very much, Shanika, and good morning to my friends of the media and the wider viewership. I want to touch on two issues today, and the first has to do with the local government ministry. I want to first bring to your attention that information reaching me, credible information, I should say, suggests that there are a number of or several vehicles that are missing from the Ministry of Local Government and Regional Development fleet. And I know that there are more information surrounding it that I am currently receiving and will subsequently put a release out with reference to those missing vehicles. And I know that within the public space, there is right now the concern about Mr. Walter Narain at the Mayor and City Council surrounding his suspension. I want to bring to the public's attention that the Local Government Commission decided that Mr. Walter Narain be suspended. That's a decision of the constitutional body. that oversees staff and the whole aspect of hiring and firing and disciplining of staff and so on. And what was very shocking is that Walter Narayan himself decided on someone else to act on in his capacity, in his position that he was holding. And that came as a shock to us. And the entire local government commission, it was a unanimous decision to suspend him. But sadly, the president intervened and gave a directive to the local government commission for Mr. Narayan to be reinstated. That is something that we should not take lightly. You cannot intervene at your level, Mr. President, to direct a constitutional body and try to hamper their work. And it goes to show that there is total lawlessness and incompetence in this current regime and the manner in which they operate. And against that backdrop and many other problems within the local government sector, NDCs and municipalities, that has caused us as the APNU AFC to table an amendment to the Local Government Commission Act, and we are seeking to ensure that this body, the Local Government Commission, does not act arbitrarily without the recommendation of the respective NDCs and municipalities. So to that end, with reference to hiring, firing, disciplining of staff members and deciding on their remuneration package and so on, we are suggesting in our amendment that it should come from a recommendation from the respective councils, be it NDCs or municipalities. And I must say that in reference to NDCs, there are a number of practices that are going on there that is unbecoming. I know of the Tushin Iflot NDC, for example, the resignation of the overseer and the assistant overseer. There was no process that was entertained for the hiring of replacements to those two office holders. Instead, it was just the Local Government Commission appointing two people of whom they feel is suitable for the position. And when you dig deeper, you will see that the two people who are appointed are related to persons who are aligned very closely to the People's Progressive Party. So we continue to monitor what is happening in the local government arena. We continue to monitor what is happening at the Local Government Commission level, and we will keep the public and the media updated. I want to also speak on the press release that was made by the National Procurement and Tender Administration Board. And NPTAB sought to think that they can override us as Guyanese and that we don't know what is happening at NPTAB. But I want to say that we have a very clear understanding of what is going on at NPTAB, and our call for an investigation by competent authority is grounded in a number of cases where contractors are accusing NPTAB of corrupt practices. And I know that the public may want to hear directly from these contractors, but the contractors spoke to us in confidence because they want to protect themselves and their identity, knowing that their only source of income is through contracts. And should they come forward and speak openly as to what is really happening at NPTAB, they are afraid that they may lose their source of income. And against that backdrop, we owe it to them to protect them, because it is not our duty to see people be placed on the breadline. But let me talk about these four pumps. These four pump stations, for example, that NPTAB attempted to justify in the most frivolous of ways. And I must say to you that when the advertisement was placed in the newspaper, it was invitation for bids for 4 pump stations. You had one for the construction of pump station at Metamirsorg, West Coast Demerara, Region 3. Then you had 2 construction of sluice pump station at Bellevue, West Bank Demerara, Region 3. Then you had construction of sluice pump station at Port-Dryne area, West Bank Demerara, Region 3. And the 4th was construction of pump station at Jimbo Grove, East Bank Demerara, Region number 4. 4 different pump stations, 4 different constructions. And we know that it is 4 different constructions because in the award that was done, each award had a separate reference number. Like, for example, the one at West Bank Demerara, Bellevue, the NP tab reference number was 166/2023/21. And the number of bids for that particular one was 26. Then you had, for example, the one at Port-Dryne, the reference number was 165/2023/21, and the number of bids 23. Now, I say that to say to you that in the response that NPTAD gave, they said in their paragraph, and I quote, specifically with regards to the construction of the Bellevue pump station project, 26 companies tendered for that project. 13 bids were deemed non-responsive and were therefore not considered for award. Of the 13 substantially responsive and compliant bids, the lowest priced responsive bid was awarded the Metamirsorg pump station, while the second lowest responsive bid was awarded the Jimbo Grove pump station. Tapui was the 3rd lowest priced responsive bidder and was awarded the Bellevue pump station. What NPTAPs tried to do there is to tell the people of Guyana that for all 4 of these projects, they only had 26 bidders. And from that 26 bidder, those 26 bidders, 13 were non-responsive. So to award for these 4 pump stations, they only had to choose from 13. And they chose by giving the lowest to Metamirsorg, the second lowest to Jimbo Grove, and the 3rd lowest to Bellevue pump station. That is far from the truth. Far, far from the truth. The first point I wish to make is that in each one of these projects, each one, the 4, Metamirsorg had 26 bidders. We learned from NPTAP press release that 13 were responsive. And from that 13, the lowest responsive got the project. That's what NPTAP said. What they didn't tell us is that for the Jimbo Grove pump station, there were 30 bidders. Of the 30 bidders, we don't know how many were responsive. But what they said here is that the second lowest bidder got the contract. That is a breach of the Procurement Act because the Procurement Act is specific that the lowest, most responsive bidder ought to get the project. What we also know from what is in the public domain is that for Bellevue, there were 26 bidders. We don't know how many of those bidders were responsive because they didn't release that information. We also know that for Port-Dryne, there were 23 bidders, but we don't know how many were responsive. The issue here is that NPTAB awarded contracts to companies that they said to us were responsive, but they have also said to us that they did not award it to the lowest, most responsive. So, what was the reason, for example, for Tapui Group being the third lowest price responsive bidder getting the job? What happened to the second most responsive or the first most responsive? And the same goes for the one at Metamir's or Pump Station. Why did NPTAB award it to the second lowest responsive bidder? Why not the first lowest responsive bidder? I want the Guyanese people to understand how the procurement system works, because NPTAB believe we don't know. When we